Alright, everything looking good and dandy. So, I am making another book review. I have not done the Mistborn script. I'm not even going to pretend that I finished it. Honestly, it's pretty good as is. I should probably get to doing that. Or at least doing the first part. I said I was going to do one for each book 1, book 2, and book 3. The first book, the thing that I'm doing is I'm listening to the audiobook and making notes of notable stuff. I just stopped listening to the audiobook because I stopped using Spotify, and I didn't really have a way to listen to the audiobook without spending $32 for the actual audiobook. And I was like, I'm not doing that shit. So I kind of just stopped listening to it. So I just then stopped doing the script for the Mistborn book, and so I just never. I mean, honestly, it's passable as is, but I'm probably gonna have to listen to a free version of the audiobook, which I just found out was a thing. And it's actually really good. It's way better than the Spotify version too. Also, fuck Spotify. If you don't know, it's mostly because of political reasons and them supporting military stuff. I think there was some other stuff that I forgot to mention, but honestly, I'm not gonna get into it. So I do plan on doing the Mistborn book review, still going over all the parts, going a little bit more in detail. To be honest though, the Mistborn books have probably had several reviews which are way better than mine and also more in depth, probably because it's one of the more popular Brandon Sanders books apart from the Archive series. But I'm still gonna do it. I've already put too much time and effort into it. I'm not even that much effort, but I made an entire script, so I might as well go. In the meantime though, I'm gonna entertain you with 3 books that I want to talk about because I've already finished them, and I figured, what, fuck it, bro, I'm on my reader time shit, so I might as well discuss some of the books I've read, and it isn't even a lot. I've only ever read 3 books since my last video, which is kind of a damn shame, but it is what it is. I'm trying to catch up. Alright, first book. This was a book I got before Halloween. It was When the Reckoning Comes by Latanya McQueen. It was a horror book. It was the cheapest thing I can find in Barnes & Noble. Also, shout out to my local library. I found out that there's a library. I forgot that them shits were a thing. And so I got my library card. And I'm planning to go to the library card more often and not buy as many books unless I really like them. But I'm gonna go finish all the books I currently have. I've only bought one more book since I got my library card. I think it was Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man, because one of my friends convinced me to read Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man. Low-key, pretty good. Maybe not low-key, maybe kind of high-key. But it's also really, I don't know if the correct word is linguistically. I don't even know if that is a word, but it's challenging in terms of vocabulary. I feel like I need to use a lot of my mind to actually read it. So I haven't gone too far into the book. I'm in chapter 5 out of a 500-page book. I might finish it though soon. If I just put enough time and effort into it. It's a very good book. It deals with a lot of interesting aspects about being a black man in America, and it takes some inspiration from Dostoevsky work. Their words, not mine. Not the author's words. I think it was my friends who recommended it that they said it was similar to Dostoevsky's, particularly Notes from the Underground, and I can definitely see it. I don't know if the author actually says that too, but I think that's a huge comparison that they do. Anyways, I'm not gonna go too into Invisible Man because I haven't actually read most of it. I'm gonna go back to this one before I go into more depth into the Invisible Man. When the Reckoning Comes, honestly, it was okay. I'd probably give it a mid out of 10, a 5, maybe 4, to be honest. It was so bear in mind, the reason I got this was because of its price. It was hella cheap. It was $12, and when everything else is $16, $18, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna like it, I was fuck it. I wanted to get a horror book because I know there's I'm on, I wouldn't say book talk, but I'm on Instagram talk. I don't know what the fuck that's called, but I'm just gonna say book talk anyways. And it always interests me, the type of vibe that people who read horror give, and some of the stories are very interesting. I wanted to be a horror girly. That's essentially what I'm saying. I don't know if there's another term for that, for guys. I don't really care for the gender, like, girly TikTok type shit like that. I don't give a fuck. But that's like that's the thing that I was wanting to do, right? I was like, I want to get into horror books. I wanted to be all broody and shit. I want to read some of these cool stories that people have in recommendation, dark and cool and stuff like that. So I was like, let me get something light. Let me go to the library, or not the library. Let me go to the bookstore, Barnes, my local bookstore, and search through the horror books and see what interests me in terms of stuff. Just catch something out of the wild, because I haven't really done that in a minute, because most of the stuff that I pick up is stuff that's been recommended, and to be honest, most of them are heaters. So I was like, let me just read through some of these pages for some of these books, and then I'll get them. It was between this one and then another book that I saw, but I like the cover for this one. I like the premise in the first couple books, and it interested me more on the other one. I was under the impression this was a white book. I was deeply wrong, and I'm kind of happy it wasn't. Basically, if I'm gonna summarize this so I don't go too into a tangent, because I'm already going on a tangent, is that this book is about a black woman who has a friend, which is a white woman, and another friend who is a black man. They grew up in the poor side of South America, as in, like, it's like southern area. I don't know, maybe it's Texas. That's where I'm at, Texas. But like South area, poor, racism, type shit that you would experience as a black woman in the South during this time period, whichever time period this may be, because I don't fucking know what time period it is. I did make a lot of annotations, actually. Unfortunately, I didn't have the little thingies here to really these thingies to really like tell you what I wrote down. So I'm just gonna go off of what I remember. But basically, this is about a woman who's black, south part of America, and we go through her experience with the supernatural as she uncovers the past of this town she grew up with. Basically, she's getting like ghostly apparitions visiting her of her ancestors who used to be slave, trying to uncover the truth for her about the horrors that transpired in this area of town, which the people are so adamantly excited to forget, or to like put a brand new paint over it. When I say brand new paint, I specifically mean a part of the town that really isn't like talked about too much in this story, where there was like a plantation building. I don't know what they're really called. It's more like a mansion, I guess. And like in the later parts of the story, before it gets revamped, it used to be like a decrepit, like old building that was left to rot until like some people bought out that area in that town, I think, and then they like refurbished it, put on a new paint, made it sort of like a tourist attraction, but they kind of whitewashed all of it. Well, not kind of, they did. Feeling like kind of is kind of like a punch in the face. They did whitewash all of it, pretty much made it look nicer. They even have people reenact the the people who would work there, the slaves and things like that. Not the slaves, the enslaved, correction, because it's important to make a distinction between those. They were enslaved people, they weren't slaves. That's not their label. Just throwing that out there, sorry. This reminds me a lot of that one time we had a school trip with like the east side of United States. Cost a shit ton of money, but basically there was one part where we went to visit Washington's estate, and they had like people tell us history about Washington and the enslaved people in his estate, but they they did whitewash a lot of it by making him seem like he was one of the good ones, who like, yeah, he did have slaves, but he did have enslaved people, but he treated them well. He was like, he was a good master, which is fucking crazy. And I didn't really think too much of it, because when I was going there as a kid, I was like, yo, this shit is hype. Not the enslaved part. For clarification, not the enslaved part. I meant like the estate itself. It was really pretty beautiful landscape. I mean, there was even a lake with like wind blowing on you. And there was a area where like they told us the enslaved people were buried, but their graves were unmarked because, of course, why would they make a burial ground for enslaved people and mark them? They just, knowing white people, they wouldn't do that shit. And we would go around like the farm. There were cattle, there was blacksmiths and stuff, and people would tell us about like the history of George Washington, black, white people, like different races, different cultures and stuff like that. And I bought into it as like a teenager going into it. I was like, yo, this is hype. And I would genuinely believe like, oh, you know, even though he was what's it called, fucking, the word is coming out of, it's not coming at me. Even though he did own people, even though he did have enslaved people, he was low-key kind of like not that bad, low-key. And you know, it was kind of crazy now that I think about it, coming back. And I was talking about this with one of my friends in the coffee shop, same one who recommended Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man, because it's about black story. He was like, yeah, it's kind of crazy how they would tell us that story and try us buy into it. And I was like, no, yeah, because I was eating that shit up, for real. I was eating it up, like, crazy style. I was like, oh, no, shit. And I was like, I want to go back there. Low-key, now, I still do want to visit, but now I just don't, because I don't want to, like, the idea of paying them to, like, fund this like iteration of history that they're trying to portray. And I have a history book about George Washington. He did some pretty cool shit, I'm not gonna lie, but he was also a white man and he owned enslaved people. So it's like, he was also not that great. Like let's not idealize historical figures, because they're all kind of fucking shit, to be honest. Like, let's be real here. Like, anyone who gets that sort of power, like anyone who really comes to notoriety, I feel like a large amount of the time, they're kind of fucking assholes. And I mean, like, every one of them. I mean, like, I don't think I know of any war commander, military commander who isn't a fucking ass. And, like, most people who are famous, most scientists are kind of, like, egoist and, like, shit. I'm thinking about, like, Oppenheimer, Napoleon, George Washington, fucking, I'm pretty sure Einstein too. He was a womanizer. I don't know if I think there was allegations that he beat someone, but like, even people nowadays, like famous people, they're all just kind of shit in their own way. Like, that's not to say like all of them are shit, but like a lot of them are. Anyways, I'm not gonna get into it, but basically, yeah, this is. I'm fucking forgot where I was in this. This book basically handles that sort of topic about racism in the South Side, being a black woman growing up poor, and the difference between a black woman growing poor in the South and a white woman growing up poor in the South. It's just not the same thing, which is a really interesting topic to handle. I think it's very on the nose about it, though. It's very on the nose. It's not very subtle at all. So subtlety is not this book's forte. In fact, I'm not sure what this book's forte is, because I think the premise is incredibly interesting and fascinating, but the problem is it's executed so poorly that it kind of doesn't warrant being an entire book, I think. And maybe that's a harsh criticism. Maybe, like, for real, that's, hey, if the author wants to shoot back, I completely understand. Maybe I was out of line on that one. But I feel like a lot of these complex subjects weren't handled as well as I thought they would have been. One thing that really irked me in the story was that the main character, despite being a black woman who grew up in the South, is somehow still naive to some of the, like, racism that she would have undoubtedly experienced as a kid and as a black woman in the South. Like, some of the stuff, like, how come they don't have like marked graves for the slaves, and it's like the enslaved, and it's like, dog, why the fuck would they care? Or like there's also like the one part that irks me the most, which was in like the beginning of the story. We learned that she's an elementary teacher first and foremost, and then we dive back into her story as she was younger, so it's kind of like flashbacks hinting at the story from before, right? And she gets a call from her friend, her old friend. They're no longer really like tight like that. They kind of just know each other, asking her to come to her wedding. And she's like, oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I'll think about it. And he's like, it's gonna be on that plantation. Huh? As a white woman, what in God's green earth made you think asking a black woman to come to a plantation for a wedding? What made you think that was a good idea? Like, be so for real right now. I mean, like, I know you guys are friends. I know you guys are tight. Or used to be. But that's fucking ludicrous, dog. And you know what made me more upset? Is the fact that she said yes. Because, like, as a black woman, where's your self-respect? Be so for real right now. Be so for real. Because you know it's going to be a white, pasty motherfucking bunch that end up going to that wedding venue. And it's not going to be no dark, melanated queens and kings out there. You know that. You know damn well they're not going to be there. So why would you put yourself in that position? They're all basically like, okay, maybe this is hyperbole, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were KKK members in there, bitch. Like, be so for real. Like, be so for real, bro. Why would you go to that sort of gathering? As a black woman, you know that's not a good idea. And then his other friend, who's also a black man, goes to the wedding, and that's why she ends up agreeing. But still, like, the self-respect is just not there, and that really angered me, because I was like, I don't care how tight you used to be. As soon as anyone would have called me being like, yeah, we're hosting a wedding, but it's gonna be at a plantation, bitch, bye. Boom. Story ends there. Because what the fuck do you mean is gonna be at a plantation? Do you just not care about the history, the respect that this sort of historical place deserves? Like, the resting ground for people who used to be abused, raped, tortured. I mean, like, come on. Like, dude, you just not care. You just not care about black people in general. Because, like, why the fuck would you do that? And, like, that was one of the main gripes I had with the story throughout the entire thing. Is, like, she was just okay with it. And, like, as the story goes on, she starts to realize, like, oh, yeah, this is more fucked up than I realized, I think. And it was, like, it was unsettling, too, because you got to witness how the white people were, like, so easily able to, like, just erase this history and make it sort of, like, a theatrical or, like, an adventure or, like, a visit to Disneyland, when it was, like, so much worse than that. It was, like, it was just bad. It was just bad, right? But, like, it was interesting seeing it through the eyes of her, right? Because as a black woman, I thought she would have been aware of this type of, like, fuckery. But she was so unaware of, like, how low people would stoop to just erase something that makes people uncomfortable. And I was like, bro, you should know this. You, out of all people, should know this. How the fuck are you still being surprised by this? But I give her the benefit of the doubt. And later on in the story, one of the guy that she ends up going, the guy who persuades her to end up going to the wedding because he's going there, he didn't talk to her directly, but she was like, oh, he's going there, I'm going there, because she has, like, a thing for him. And so he was like, oh, maybe I'll get a meet up and like you feel me? Not exactly that, but you get with that. You get that idea, right? And the guy ends up calling her on her bullshit. She was like, you always thought you were better than us, because, like, also her mom kind of has some internalized racism, because she's like, black people ain't shit, because, like, they're not doing shit. And it's like, I'm probably paraphrasing that. Someone's gonna clip that out of context, but, like, basically what she was saying, right? Type shit. And, like, he was like, you think you're better than us because you didn't, like, because you separated yourself apart from us and you didn't hang out with us. And it was like, you're just as bad as her for this and this and that. And it was like, it was an interesting perspective, because I think, like, the whole reason that she didn't know about any of this sort of stuff is because she was willfully being ignorant to a lot of it, because I think she would I don't know, maybe separate her blackness from the other black kids because of her mother and how she spread her ideals to her. I think that's a very interesting idea, but I don't know if that's, maybe I missed the whole point, maybe I just like but like I feel like it wasn't handled that well, because she's honestly not written that deeply for you to get that sort of like idea, right? It was kind of like, oh, this is kind of surface level a lot of the times. And they brought up some good points though. I think the most interesting part was by the end of the book, where they go over like some of the stuff that happened to the enslaved people in the estate, and you would look through the eyes of the enslaved person. I think some of the stuff that they handled were pretty good, because they really gave you an image of how bad like people were treated while as an enslaved person, as a black person during that time. They would use you for everything and treat you as anything but a human. And I think it does good to like show that image. But that was only like 25% of the book, and that was on the last part. For like the first 75% of the book is basically just building up to that, and like a lot of it is a romance between her, the main character, and that guy I told you about, and that was pretty much it. And like they end up getting together, and there's a clash of ideas between the two of them about like, should we let the white people die at the plantation wedding thing, because they're horrible people too, and it's stuff like that. And she was like, no, because we got to be better than them and stuff, yada yada yada. And they end up going back, and no one ends up dying except for the husband and the white girl that they both were friends with, because apparently she got I guess I probably should have said spoilers, but honestly, it's all right. The premise was better than the actual execution. I would honestly give this like a 5, maybe 6 out of 10. It was all right. It was a short book, that's why I got it, and it was also the least expensive one, so that's why I got it. Would I ever read this again? No, never really. It was good for one time, but that's it. I wouldn't. Okay, the next one, because it's short. Actually, let me do this one first, because I technically read 3 books, but this one I already started. Yes, that's right, it's a classic one. Yes, I'm like that. It was alright. That's really all I have to say. I started this like a year prior and just finished it because I had like 400 pages left, and I was like, bro, I gotta finish this eventually. So I just like locked in and finished this. The reason I stopped reading it was because it got boring and repetitive. 7 out of 10, maybe 8. Maybe 8's too high, to be honest. I know that's crazy. A lot of people will punt me and I was gonna say hang, but I feel like with the fact that I just talked about the black experience in the South, hanged is actually probably a little bit inconsiderate right about now. I will be punted for that opinion, but it all just got really repetitive. If you've read Crime and Punishment, it's basically just that, but just elongated. And I know that's a super simplification and probably doesn't do it justice, but that's how I felt about it. It felt like it was, a lot of the times the conversation were just overdrawn, and a lot of the philosophical debates and discussions were stuff that I've already heard of, but like directly from philosophers. So I feel like they were more adequately explained and gone over with, so they weren't as nuanced to me, and they kind of just felt flimsy. And I was like, I get why, if a person who was reading this and had never had any philosophical like articles and stuff they had read beforehand or discussion, they would have been probably like really amazed by some of the concepts that were brought up about like religion and stuff like that. It didn't really do anything for me though. It felt like it was lacklustered. And I can get why this would be a staple in classic literature and why people regard it in high regard. It just, for me, was a little bit dull. I didn't like the main character at all. I felt like Aloysia was kind of bare bones, and I get why. The romance between him and that one girl was weird because she was like underage, but I guess for the time, And like the whole conflict between the brothers and the dad, I didn't care for. I feel like other stories maybe did it better. Honestly, I felt like it was just kind of eh. I don't really have any feelings on it. I read it because it was classic literature and because people said it was Dostoevsky's best work. Low-key, I prefer Crime and Punishment over this, Brothers of Karamazov, and I prefer Notes from the Underground as a short story from Dostoevsky, because I think it does well to show you what Dostoevsky's work is mostly about, which is like that kind of character that just like says a bunch of shit and like talks how he thinks and stuff like that. It's a lot of rambling, which is what Dostoevsky is good at. But I personally don't have much to say on this. It was okay. It was okay. And also the court hearing part, I went to an actual court hearing, so now I know what they look like, and I just couldn't be convinced this was a court hearing, to be honest. It was kind of like, kind of brought me out of it. It was a lot of times I was like, yo, this would never fly in actual court. Anyways, that was pretty short, and I'm gonna move on to my last one because my fucking camera's overheating, and I'm pretty sure that shit's gonna fucking turn off in like a minute or two, so I'm gonna just fucking rapid fire. This was The Science of Evil. It's a nonfiction book. I got this at the Holocaust Museum. It was actually pretty okay. It was fun. It was basically just the idea of like, evil isn't an adequate description of why people do horrible shit in humanity. And I couldn't agree more. It was already a discussion that was brought up better, I would say, in another context while I was taking Phil 101, Intro to Phil. And it was like evil kind of dehumanizes people into another, like otherness, and sort of makes it easier for us to see them as separate than human. But personally, I feel like anything that has ever been committed by humanity, as cruel and as awful and horrendous as it has been, is still within the human confines and shouldn't be considered evil, because it sort of mystifies it and them and sort of negates, or like not negates, but like makes it so people don't want to prod any further and try to study why it is that people commit such atrocities. And this book basically just discusses that. It tackles that idea, which is like we should look at evil more through a scientific lens, and be able to discern what causes people to do such great atrocities. And we shouldn't just be okay with being like, oh, it's because they were evil, because that's not an adequate answer, and that's not going to prove to be useful in any regards. It's not satisfactory. It doesn't do anything, right? And so he basically uses the scientific method, psychology, experiments, into trying to locate the factors that make a person do such horrible things. And it's not like saying like, if you have this, this, and that, then you're gonna do this. It's basically just underlying like how people commit it. So basically saying that in order to commit these great atrocities, you first have to have a lack of empathy. That's like the starting ground for horrible shit. So they say like people with zero empathy are like the starting point for abhorrent action. That doesn't mean everyone who has zero empathy will do horrible shit, but only people with zero empathy are capable of doing horrible shit. And I'm not able to describe entirety of that, bitches. I'm back. Okay, so sorry about that. I had to sort of wait for the camera to cool down. Anyways, fuck, what was I? Yeah, basically, I have no fucking idea what was the last thing I was saying, but the Science of Evil basically just takes the scientific method on describing what it is that causes people, or the fundamentals, the building blocks needed for people to do horrible shit. And this is basically brought on because of like the idea of the Holocaust. The author is Jewish. They actually also didn't mention Palestine and Israel, although I don't really like how it didn't really go too much into that. Well, there was a part where it goes into it, but it doesn't really elaborate too much on the Palestinian side of things, and mostly goes into the perspective as a Jewish man and like their roots in as to like why Jewish people care so much about Israel and like having a country for what's it called, for a group of people who were persecuted for a large part of history and stuff like that. But like it doesn't really go much into Palestine other than like saying like, oh, fucking they did this shit and bombed that shit, but it's also not cool for us to like kill people's families and shit. And it's like, okay, well, you could have gone a little bit more in depth into that. But this is also an old book. Still though, could have gone a little bit more in depth into that. Apart from that though, there was also some references to other parts of history, but like the most interesting part and the reason why you would read this is because of like the idea of trying to break down what can cause people to do such harm. I feel like I have some like highlighted aspects that I think I could read off of, but I mean like a lot of this stuff is just me saying like, oh shit, yo, for real, dog, you could have worded that a little bit better. Like it's like not useful at all. Yeah, and honestly also most of my tabs are pretty fucking useless in terms of like being able to tell you shit. But I mean, it's a really interesting book. It's also a short book, which is why I read it. Both of the books that I told you about, I read because they were short and I could almost finish them. So I was like, I might as well knock this off the fucking park. But yeah, it's a pretty good book, I guess. Would I recommend it? It's like a compelling book if you've never heard the idea of like differentiate or like evil not existing because it's not something that actually exists, and you want to know a little bit more what causes people to do such horrible shit, then I think it's an interesting book that you might find some merit in reading. It could be quite compelling. It brings up some good arguments. I think the whole thing about separating the three types of personalities that have zero empathy are like borderline personality, the narcissist, and then what was the other one? Shit, the psychotic person. All having zero empathy was really interesting. Because it was just an interesting, like, it was like, people could most likely stem from this sort of thing and that sort of thing. And it's interesting because it brings up the whole thing where it's like, if we think about it in this way, the way we can sort of try to maneuver around these mental disabilities and try to help these people can greatly change if we think about it through this perspective. It's not like something that what's it called, that's unhelpable or stuff like, I don't know, bro. You'd have to read this to really be able to get what I'm saying, to be honest. You'd have to be there for real. You'd have to be there to get what I'm saying. But it's a good book. I would give it like a 5 out of 10. No, it's not probably like a 6 out of 10. The highest one I got was of course Brothers, but I mean, like, it's a good book. Don't get me wrong, it's a good book. It's not my type of book, I think. This reads like an academic paper. If you've ever read academic papers for the purpose of like a study or like your research paper, it's basically just that, but just longer. It even has the references and stuff like that because it is just a nonfiction book. I got this at the Holocaust Museum, so I was like, I gotta get to this eventually, and so I got to it. And look, it's an interesting concept. It's interesting. It does bring up some good points, especially with like the whole bipolar personality disorder, and like how people usually stem because of some sexual abuse or stuff like that. And it goes into like interesting aspects of like the psychology of kids and why it's important to be a good parent and not neglect them, because you're basically setting them up for the rest of your life. It also goes into aspects about genetics when it comes into psychology, how it isn't based, genetics don't play 100% of the part as to how you'll turn up, but it is a big factor along with environmental factors that cause you to be who you are. And that's an interesting discussion, although it is uncomfortable for a lot of reasons. But it goes into stuff like that, and it goes through a scientific lens. I feel like a lot of the times some empathy may have been warranted when they were discussing some of the topics, because I feel like they sort of would classify people with mental disabilities as others instead of like the same, although maybe it's because they were just the way that they written it. But overall, it was I could have done maybe with it being a little bit shorter. Went heavily into the science of it, like the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, stuff like that. So that was cool, but that's everything I read. Was gonna make this short, just wanted to make that. Didn't really have anything else to say. Also, my storage is almost up, so figured, all in all, the only book I would really recommend is none of them. Maybe Brothers of Karamazov, just if you never read any of Dostoevsky's work. So yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Bye.